Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Law Firm Growth Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Jan Roos, and I am really excited to dive into our conversation today. We have Don Smith of Smith Kleinsmith, fantastic niche practice, one of our favorite topics on the podcast. But just from the pre-chat, I can tell you that this is going to be a good one. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Don.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. So to kind of like go into what we're talking about a little bit, I can already tell like you have a huge passion for this. And currently, just big picture, you're running a nationwide elder abuse law firm. But I wanted to go back to the beginning because it seems like you guys are crushing it right now. But where did you end up getting started when the firm started out?
So when my partner and I, Curtis, got together, we really were focusing on mass torts. We were doing a lot of asbestos litigation, and we were doing it nationwide. We were trying to do a different business model, really catering to more people that had been exposed to asbestos that didn't necessarily have mesothelioma. So that was kind of the business model. My partner, Curtis, always had his own personal practice as well. And we were just sitting having lunch one day, and I was talking to him. I said, why don't we do nursing home abuse nationally? Because he was really focused in Texas. And we just sat there for a minute in silence and thought, maybe we can do this, because just for nursing home litigation, a lot of practices, most practices are local or regional, and they do it really at a smaller scale, not really, you can't get to as many people and help as many people as we're trying to do. So that's kind of the evolution.
Okay, interesting. So there's a couple of things I want to follow on that, but the first one that kind of comes to mind is it seems like you guys had already gotten comfortable with serving nationwide with the asbestos stuff you guys are doing. But for anyone who's in the audience right now that's thinking, I mean, that sounds cool, but I'm only barred in Texas or I'm only barred in Connecticut. How did you guys do that?
That's a great question. So that's one of the questions we get quite a bit. If we have lawyers now in our office that are licensed in 16 states. So, but before we didn't. And usually what would happen is we'd find a case, we'd be working on a case, and then we would file a motion to be admitted into that particular case in that state. Pro hoc vice is what it's called.
Mm.
So we were, cases could be worked up from the bankruptcy standpoint, which is how we were handling asbestos. And depending on the jurisdiction that you're working in, you can take on cases and investigate them. But after you decide to file them, you have to have that anchor in the state, and then you file a pro hoc motion to get in. But now we have someone licensed in almost every state that we're practicing in, and then great local counsel that we work with as well.
Okay, that's awesome. I mean, obviously a little bit of a moat you had to build by doing that, but I mean, I'm sure it probably made sense in the end when the numbers worked out, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the move to nursing home. I guess like what attracted you to the nursing home stuff, and why was a good move to move outside of the asbestos stuff in your opinion?
So, I mean, we've always really thought that this community is one of the most vulnerable communities, and so many lawyers are reluctant to take these cases because there's so many impediments. There are caps, there are all kinds of problems when you get into these cases, and landmines if you don't know about these kind of cases. And it's just, and if you only can get $250,000 on your best day, why are you going to do that as a lawyer? So really, when tort reform started kind of coming across the nation and really impacting medical malpractice cases most of the time. Now, there are some statutes specific to states that allow for additional recovery in an elder abuse case. There are some laws that protect this category of people, and you can get outside of that cap. But we just thought, if we could do it right, we could help a lot of people in a really underserved community. And it's just, my grandmother lived with us for 16 years. She helped raise my kids, super close with her. There's just something about having that relationship and understanding that relationship. So many people are in nursing homes that are just not treated with any type of dignity or respect. And heaven forbid there's not a family that's close by that's kind of watching everything that's going on. I mean, it just kind of tugs at both of us. It's just an important area that you can really, I feel like, make a difference in.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's a super specialized skill set too, like kind of getting into the things. And like, I can definitely understand why somebody who's like a local counsel or like, maybe running a more general practice or PI focused or whatever, and they take one of these every 18 months and they're not ever going to really get good at the kind of stuff that you've been able to focus on like every day. Right.
Yeah, I mean, niching down, I think, we were talking a minute ago, niching
Yeah.
down, I think is so important now that we can really practice remotely with a lot of depositions and hearings. COVID really was a game changer. We all had no idea what we were going to do to get through it, but on the back end, it really made lawyers change. The lawyers hate change. Absolutely hate it. And we had to change. We had to adapt. And I mean, you would never have been able to have a remote hearing before in a judge's court, and they were required to do it, and then everybody started doing it. In fact, I would have said 5 years ago that I would have never taken a really important deposition remotely at all, ever. And now, I mean, you can control the room, you can control the environment. There's all kinds of different techniques that you can use to make sure that you're getting the best testimony for your client. It's just, we've adapted, and now because of that, you can focus on one practice area and get really good at it. And if you can do that, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating too, because I mean, and just as far as like highlights to kind of bring things to the present, I'm just super curious on. So like what's the farthest you've done like state-wise, as far as the farthest away from Dallas, or a case that you guys have worked on just off the top of your head?
Well, we're nationwide, we're coast to coast. I
Yeah.
mean, we have cases in New York, we have cases in Florida, and we have cases in California. So
Yeah.
none in Hawaii, none in Alaska.
Yeah.
but,
The
but we're
Guam and okay, no.
exactly not
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're coast to coast.
Okay, super cool. And then just kind of as far as like what the practice looks like today, like I know you guys, you mentioned having a bunch of attorneys on staff, but just like high level, like how big has it gotten since you guys made the switch?
So we have 20 attorneys right now and 40 staff. So, and we've grown quite a bit just within the last year. So we really took a step back to make sure we had processes in place and so a good support system to be able to grow the business. We use Litify, which really has been a game changer. It's helped us really kind of automate and be able to focus on the data. I've listened to your podcast. Data is super important, right? If you have that ability to kind of stand in someone's office without actually being in someone's office, you have the ability to scale. So that's made a big impact on our firm.
Yeah. And just to kind of highlight this for anybody listening to this podcast, you're not going to get to those kind of staff numbers on accident. Like, I think it's a testament to the model that you guys have working in gangbusters. And what I want to kind of say is, like, obviously, for everyone listening to this, we're having a conversation about elder abuse, but the bigger picture of this is just the benefits of niche practicing and stuff like that. So I want to switch gears a little bit into kind of like the marketing side of things. And this is something that it's super funny. I started having this conversation like 10 years ago, and it comes up every now. I used to start having it with clients, but it comes up on the podcast now and then. But I always tell people, you have a tension between volume and relevance. That's the fundamental thing we're talking about digital advertising, or really any advertising place. And I think it's super key for what you guys have been able to do, and with anyone looking to do a niche practice is that there's not a million elder abuse cases, or name the type of niche cases that are going to be happening within a 5 mile radius of your office. But when you bring that scope out statewide, nationwide, regional, whatever you can really handle from an operations perspective, you have the ability to skim the cream on a potentially small market or a small total volume of cases, but able to do it on a nationwide basis. So I wanted to ask, Don, how you get in front of these people? How are we finding some elders to help?
A lot of our cases, the vast majority of our cases are referrals. And the reason why we have so many cases coming to us is because we take a wide variety of cases in this area. So if you're practicing, you only have 3 associates and a smaller staff, you really have to take a smaller number of cases because they're not easy cases. I mean, they're document intensive and you've got to work them up. So from our perspective, we take cases that aren't just the best cases with the best families, with the best facts. And when I say that, I mean the worst facts, right? Just the most horrific.
Personally, yeah.
Exactly, the most horrific cases. So our model is trying to help as many people as possible who have been victims of elder abuse. I mean, we just don't think that just because somebody has a stage 4 pressure wound as opposed to a stage 3 that we shouldn't take the case. I mean, the person has still suffered. It's still a horrific injury, and all of those cases deserve some type of attention. And I don't know, got to change this field one case at a time. And to do that, you've got to take cases that aren't just the premier cases.
Yeah. Well, I think from a moral perspective, it makes a ton of sense, but also just from like a cold business perspective, you've got a lot, we had a podcast that we did not too long ago, just basically, like the pyramid of cases. And like, obviously you've got those super primo ones at the top, especially if we're talking about something that's contingency based. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's kind of interesting because you almost have to have the scale that you guys are operating at to make that make sense. Like you said, it was like, if you've got the one person with 3 associates, it's like, they kind of can't commit those hours unless it's going to be a really big shot that's going to pay off. So it's like, I mean, you're not only bringing a skill set that's super rare to this market, you're actually hitting a segment of people that other people aren't potentially able to work with, which I find super fascinating. And as far as like getting the referrals and stuff too, like what kind of arrangements do you guys usually have with the partner attorneys that you guys work with?
It varies. It depends on how involved they're going to be with the case. I mean, sometimes we have 50-50 partnerships. Sometimes our local counsel is 15%. The referral partners are getting, 25%. It just depends on the people that we're working with and the level that they provide coming into the case and any type of support that they're going to have on the back end. So we really work with quite a few firms and have different deals with each of them depending on the work that they provide as well. So it's different, and you have to make sure it makes sense. For example, if we're working with somebody that's providing cases to us that where we have somebody that is licensed there, we're going to be able to do some type of a better deal than where we have to hire local counsel in addition to that referral partner. So you just really have to look at all of the circumstances to make it work.
Gotcha. But I think like case by case too, it's like, even if you have the situation where it's going to be a much smaller outcome, like I always try to think about these things in terms of like the total ecosystem for the referral partners. And it's like, if it's a matter of taking, it's whatever people say, a third of a watermelon or 100% of a grape, I think that's, kind of the thing. But not to mention the fact that if you guys have the bandwidth to be able to take on cases, it's a third of a watermelon or nothing. It's like a lot of times if they don't have the bandwidth to take these cases, it's just like, these poor people are going to still be in the bad situation they are getting taken advantage of without being able to work with somebody like you guys.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's the whole point. I mean, and you have to be passionate about what you're doing from my perspective. I mean, as a lawyer, we work hard. It's not one of those easy jobs. I mean, there are a lot of things that we do that takes 100% of your effort. So you need to pick something that you care about. I mean, why would you be working in a practice area and doing a bunch of different things that maybe you really like this, but I'm going to do this on the side too? That doesn't make a lot of sense to Curtis and I. We just niching down is really the best decision we've made in our practice, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's a fantastic segue, because the next thing I wanted to talk about was how you guys have built your skill sets up over the time. Because I think it was this is something we're talking about a little bit. It's like, I can see a lot of situations, and for the solos that are listening to this episode right now, it's like, yeah, everyone's got a time where you got to scrap and scrimp and take every single case on. Hopefully you get to a point where you can move past that. But a lot of times there's going to be that leap of faith, because if this is the kind of situation where it's a case type you see every 6 months, every 18 months, you're going to probably have to start from scratch the next time you get another case.
You
And
do.
then, there's not, if it's just the situation that you're a person that's can fog a mirror with a JD that's taking the case, it's like not going to be a huge advantage to the client or whatever. And again, that's certainly not going to be a strategy to draw a bunch of referrals either. So,
Exactly.
can you take us through like the situation after you guys made the decision? What did it look like? What was it like making, burning the bridges? Like, take us through what it looked like after you guys made that decision.
Well, I mean, we're still learning. I mean,
Yeah.
we're still learning and growing in this field. I mean, there's just so many layers to it, so many different layers, and really the hard part is determining which case you're focusing these resources on, depending on where it is. You have to kind of allocate what you're doing on each case. And firm-wide growth and learning is one of our pillars, right? So, for example, we did a boot camp at the beginning of this year for all of our associates, where it was every day at lunch for an hour, walking through the nuts and bolts of a nursing home case. We take all of our associates to, the national conferences like the AAJ conference to make sure that they're learning in this area. So I think it's all about really having just a culture of growth and learning in this area. And you never know everything. There's got to be that mindset to where you're meeting people and you're talking to them and you're saying, hey, what are you doing different? What's working for you? Who do you know? How have you been successful in this area? It's about talking to people. It's about building relationships, and it's all about growth and learning.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny too. I think like that's the sign of an expert, is the person that understands that the field is ever expanding. I think you got to watch out when you're talking to people like, yeah, we pretty much got it all figured out.
No, not in this area.
Yeah, well, it's the other thing too, kind of going back to the benefits of specialization. It's like if if you're taking a family law case one day and a criminal case the next, and then one of these every now and then, it's like you don't have time to go really deep on this stuff. It's like it's kind of, I mean, I'm not going to say a luxury because you guys have earned it for sure, but it's like you have to have the bandwidth to focus on things deeply, and it's just impossible to do when you're spreading your resources.
And that's the whole thing about this. Once you learn it, you know it. And it's definitely heavy on the front end. And like I said, we're always learning and growing. But if you're doing the same thing, you can really help more people because you've learned it that one time and you're like, okay, this worked on this case, and now we've got this associate here talking to another associate maybe in Ohio. Hey, have you looked at this? I was able to get these documents through these channels, try that. So we've got information sharing within the firm across all these jurisdictions as well, which we can duplicate across the country, which I love. That's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you guys are just building up this internal knowledge base. And like, I mean, if you wanted to look at it like that, like you guys have a lot of proprietary secret sauce like within the firm at this point.
That's the goal. And to do that, you have to be really organized and not siloed. So you have to have communication open, firm wide, to where the associates are doing, doing things, but also sharing the information as they learn and grow in that specific jurisdiction, so that we can try it. I mean, we have a law in motion department that we created this year, and just a brilliant person heading that department up. And now we have kind of one voice across all of the jurisdictions, because she is writing basically similar arguments, but pulling different law. And then that just gives you so much creativity in making your arguments and making a winning argument. So you have to be really organized. You have to make sure you're keeping track of, which insurance companies are handling which claims, which parent companies have these many facilities. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, organization is really key. And as you scale, you have to be able to grab that information that you've learned from another case. I mean, if you can't get it later on or don't know it exists, then it doesn't really help you.
Yeah, you don't really have like the residue, but like I think it's also brilliant too. Like, I mean, that's kind of another, and just to kind of there's so many ways that this specialization can help, and this just seems like one more manifestation of the principle. It's like it's not until you guys are at the point, or not that until firms at the point where you're seeing enough people, you could think about having someone that specializes in just writing those specific things.
Yeah.
But I mean, the benefit to what you guys are able to offer to somebody as a client, and again, or representing somebody who's referring to you, it's just tremendous. And I think it's just like, it's such a simple principle that focus ends up leading to growth. It's like there's only so much things you can do. Okay, speaking of growth though, I'm super intrigued about this because I can tell you guys have done some very intentional design on this. So take me back to like, as far as kind of the situation, how did you guys choose to grow the firm? And like, just as far as a headcount perspective, we went into what it is right now, but What was it like at the time that you guys made the switch away from the asbestos stuff?
So when we were trying to make a decision about what states to go into, is that what you're
Or
talking
just
about?
when you guys decided to double down on the nursing home stuff? Like, what did the firm look like then before you guys ended up starting growing?
So we had more of our staff. We didn't have as many lawyers, right? Because the type of work that we were doing. I mean, we didn't just do asbestos. We did PI. We did some toxic tort cases. We did really a wide variety of cases. Asbestos was what kind of opened up that concept to be able to practice nationwide because we had so many clients all over the country that we were representing in asbestos bankruptcy cases. So, but from the litigation standpoint, we had a wide variety of cases. So when we decided to do nursing home, we really it was hard because you got to turn down those other cases.
Right.
So good cases come in and you're like, oh, well, maybe I'll just do that one. But January 1, we said, no, we're going to refer those cases out no matter what. And then you just have to build the infrastructure. And I will say, we took a couple steps forward and we had to take a step back too, because we kind of started hiring people, assigning dockets, and didn't have those processes in place that because you can't grow and not and have everybody doing things different. That just is chaos. So having those processes in place, figuring out exactly what documents we were going to target, figure out what states we were going to litigate in, all of that was really the planning phase of it. And when you're trying to decide what type of jurisdiction you're going into, you got to look, are there caps, are there not, what's the average value of the case, how many nursing homes are there, how many, what is the potential for the number of cases that we can have in that jurisdiction to where it makes sense to go there. So I mean, a lot of things. It's a big question for sure.
Yeah. And kind of like doubling down on the operation stuff. It's like, is that something that you guys were handling? I mean, were you personally running that, Don, or did you guys bring in some people to help you from an assistant perspective? You guys have like an ops type role within the business? Like, how did all that work out?
So Curtis is really the business guy, and always has. That's his passion. He is loves it. He's masters in business, and he has really always thrived in that area. And when we came together, I don't love the business side. I'm the litigator. I love to be in court. I love to litigate the cases. So it seemed like a natural partnership. So really, when it comes to operations and the vision of the firm regarding how it would operate, that's really my partner. We're really lucky we have a COO, Charlie Kirby, who's been working with us, actually started working with Curtis over 20 years ago,
Wow.
and has been with us through every phase of the firm. So she's our COO, and we really started building out kind of the operations side within the last 12 months.
Well, that's awesome. It seems like you guys had a lot of the pieces kind of like on available when you guys were able to make that switch, which I'm sure was probably a big part of how you guys were able to like grow so fast. And as far as like any kind of philosophies, and apologies if this is more of a Curtis question, is like, is there any like, do you guys like to subscribe to any sort of like, you know, I'm sorry, editor, take this out. Blanking, sorry. Um, any sort of like authors or systems like scaling up or, EOS or any of those different things?
Yeah, I mean, really what got us down this path during COVID was Traction, the book called
Oh,
Traction.
cool. Yeah.
Gene Wickman, right? I mean, that's really kind of what got us started in this. We have joined a bunch of different coaching programs as well. We've been with Chris, we were with Fireproof, we've used EOS. At this point, we've really kind of modeled our own system of management and that follow through and that cadence of meetings. But it was Traction that started us on this path. At least for me, Curtis had that background much more so than I did. That just baseline knowledge. When he said, "Dawn, I really want you to read this book," I said, "Okay."
Yeah.
You're the business guy. Why do I have to read this book? But we went and read a book called Vivid Vision, which is great, and actually wrote a vision for our firm, planned it out for 5 years and then backed it out. So it was really a process, but I would say those two books, Vivid Vision and Traction, are a great place to start if you want to either grow your firm or make a change, right? Make a big change and niche down.
Yeah. All right, so we'll definitely get those in the show notes for you guys too. So funny enough, I actually read Cameron Harold's other book before. I don't know if I ever read Vivid Vision. I think it was a chapter in the first one, but yeah, huge fan of EOS. But I also find it super interesting you guys didn't. Well, you're pretty much at a point where you've taken what you've needed out of those systems and kind of gotten something that works a little bit better for your situation at that point, if I'm hearing that correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. We've just kind of modified it over time. Over the last 4 years, we've just kind of modified exactly what works, what doesn't. But so many great takeaways from all of the programs that we've been a part of.
Yeah. And I think it's also good too, just because people get a little sometimes like religious about oh yeah, like we're at like 87 or 91% like this, but at some point too, honestly, I think it's tough I mean, for any it's just like any system for any kind of organization, just like it's a lot easier to be prescriptive earlier in the path. And then the larger you get, like, I mean, you guys truly are doing something that's pretty much one of a kind at this point. So, hard to kind of railroad into certain things, right? So that's super cool.
Well, I mean, we came up against, we did a lot of testing, personality testing. We really believe in that. We use Print and we use Colby. I don't know if you've
Okay.
heard.
I love Colby.
So I love Colby too.
Yeah.
The problem is with traction is you need an integrator, right, and a
Mhm.
visionary. That's the system. And so when Curtis and I took these tests, we ended up testing almost identical.
Mhm.
Neither one of us was strong in the integrator side. We were both visionary side. So that has really been kind of a challenge to figure out how to make that work with both of us leading the firm and being equal partners. So, we kind of had to modify because nothing really fit. I was like, wait, maybe we can't do this. We
Yeah.
don't have a visionary and an integrator. So, really kind of wrapping our heads around that, getting behind it, and figuring out how to make it work. I mean, we're committed 100% to fulfilling this vision that we both came up with quite a bit ago. And I think we're on the right path. We're still learning and growing, but it changes and you got to adapt. If you own a business and you own a law firm, there's going to be changes and challenges and just got to dig in and move forward.
Yeah. And I want to ask you about this too, because it seems like you guys have a really, really strong working partnership. And it's beautiful to see one of those in action. And super interesting to hear that you guys are both kind of on the visionary side of things. Um, if you don't mind me asking, like, how did you guys end up getting to work out between the double visionary challenge? I think that's a pretty unique dilemma I've never heard about before.
It is, and we still are trying to work it out every
Good.
day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the hard part about it is we are always kind of thinking many steps ahead and things that make sense to us. Thankfully, we're almost always on the same page now that we've niched down. We had some challenges before when we were doing a lot of different practice areas that kind of pulled at us because we didn't have the same goals in the same motion. We were kind of pulling from each other. But I think that it's super challenging, but you just have to have a lot of communication. You have to make sure that you're talking every day about, where are we going? How are we changing? What do we want to accomplish? And how are we going to do that? And you have to surround yourself with people that help fulfill that vision, people that are responsible, that can put your plan in place. Because if you just have a couple of visionaries like going crazy everywhere and no one to work on the nuts and bolts, then you're out of luck. So we're lucky we have some great people around us that make sure that they're implementing our vision.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue too, because that was the next thing I had on the list. So, I think you guys mentioned some of the stuff you're talking about with hiring people. So, you mentioned a pillar. So, I'm curious about what you guys decided to go for from a culture perspective.
So our values,
Right.
that's all part of Vivid Vision. If you haven't read that, you really need to
I
read
gotta
that.
check it out. The chapter
Yeah.
was enough. I might have to revisit
It's really good. Our acronym is FACTS. So fearless, accountable, compassionate. We also are tenacious and always striving to make a difference. So I think that really getting behind all of those, sitting down, coming up with what were the most important things for us, and trying to cultivate that I don't know, just that passion about all of those things, it's difficult. But if you have values that you're talking about on a daily basis, I mean, when we're interviewing people, we let them know exactly what our core values are. And they actually have to submit a closing statement on why their core values line up with ours. And they have to video it and submit it to us. It needs to be 1 to 2 minutes. And that's the first thing that we ask them to do. And it has to be done within 24 hours. So that's a big part of the interview process. I mean, for somebody to be able to talk about those things and tell us how those core values integrate with their own values, you have to have that to build something like we're building.
Yeah, I think it's definitely like easier to do. I mean, I'm curious too, as far as how you guys are able to bring this more into the day-to-day stuff too. Because I mean, it's funny enough, I didn't do vivid vision, but we ended up doing a big exercise that coming about 2, 3 years back for us personally. But I think we had more fun during the exercise than after it, reinforcing it. I'm sure there's some listeners who have done the same. So how do you guys like, keep the gospel at the top of everyone's mind these days?
I think it's hard. It's not about just having a T-shirt, right, that
Right.
has those core values. I mean, you really have to act out those core values as a leadership team. I mean, when it comes to trying cases, we try cases. It's not like when we talk about that, we're talking about being fearless. The defense lawyers always wait, and those offers always go up, right? The closer and closer and closer you get to trial. And we take risks. I mean, if we believe in a case and, the clients feel like they need their voices heard, and if the defendants aren't offering enough, we'll try the case. And I mean, we don't win all of them. We certainly don't win all of them, but if anything, I want to develop a reputation that we are not scared to try cases. So we do that. Accountability, we really, that comes through in how we're managing our data. We have data
Yeah.
meetings on a monthly basis, so everybody knows exactly where they're at. If they're accomplishing all of those fields, if all of their fields in Litify are filled out, we hold people accountable that way. I think we just are not willing to work with people if they don't have compassion. I mean, anybody that's working in this area of the law and the stories that the clients tell us, I mean, is just some of the things that we hear. If you don't have compassion and empathy, I mean, you'll weed yourself out, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
And when it comes to overall learning and growing, striving to improve, being tenacious, I mean, if you're not, you cannot accomplish our vision in this firm. I mean, you have to be a person that is willing to file the motions to compel, go forward and make sure you're getting all of the documents that you need for your clients to put on the best case. And there are roadblocks everywhere. So, I mean, one of the things that we require are motions to compel when they're needed to make sure we're getting all the documents. So I feel like those are some of the ways that we're trying to be consistent with our core values, but it's challenging. It really is. It's challenging to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Yeah. You reminded me of this quote. You've definitely heard this one before, but culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I feel like with the level of complexity that you guys are both seeing within a case, and also just all the different jurisdictions you guys are operating at, it's impossible to SOP some of that stuff. But if you guys have a way that you're attacking the problems, I think that's what's empowering people to do what you guys have been able to do for all your clients, which is awesome. So I completely lost track of time, but I wanted to kind of close things out for a little. So my big thing for you is if for the people in the audience that are listening to this, what would your piece of advice be for somebody who's on the cusp of deciding whether they want to niche down for practice?
Well, I just, like I was saying, I mean, we work so many hours and we work so hard, that, it's okay to choose something that you love. You're going to be better at it. Your clients are going to get better service. You are just going to be more knowledgeable in that area. There's just no reason now, not to niche down into a certain area that you care about. I know it's scary because you're thinking, are there enough cases? But I have never talked to somebody that's gone out on their own or niched down that was like, oh gosh, I can't, I'm not going to be able to have enough cases. I don't have enough cases. It always works out. You have to have a plan, but the hardest part is just taking that first step. And it's really, I don't know, it's kind of freeing actually to know that you've made that choice to just kind of double down into one area, to be a specialist in that area so that you can help the clients and serve them in the best possible way.
Yeah. And that's the most important thing at the end of the day. It's like if the clients aren't getting a good experience or they're not being done right by, then, I think that's what ends up making everything work for everybody. And, I think it's so awesome that you're taking the time to come on the show, Don, and give people a positive example of what happens when you can niche down. If you guys want to see an example of what happens when you don't niche down, go to your local bar. All right. So it's been awesome having you on this on the show, Don. Thanks again for coming on. But yeah, so as far as anyone who's want to get in touch or reach out, what's the best way to get in your world?
They can email me at dawn@fightingelderabuse.com. Our URL is fightingelderabuse.com, which I love. So yeah, reach out to me. Happy to help in any way I can.
Okay, thank you so much. And then yeah, super generous and like yeah, I'll we'll get that in the show notes for you guys as well. So Don, thank you another time. It's been so awesome talking to you. For everybody else, I'll see you guys next Tuesday at 8 a.m. Eastern on the Law Firm Growth Podcast.